Good evening, and you are tuned in to In Session on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. And you can catch us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, no, Twitch, and Periscope. And you have your host, Dr. T, and
Dr. Fishta.
today we are talking about post-election stress. Oh my goodness. How many of you guys are feeling stressed after this election? I know we were feeling some prior to, but there's still some post-election stress going on.
Well, I think it's the worst of it because clearly we still don't have a decision on the president and on many other positions in Congress, and people are feeling it. And why? We know that a lot of people were worried about possible some form of chaos during the election day. Then there seemed to be an easier time after that, and then you go into the next day, to the next day, and you have all eyes on TV and radio and social media and so forth, which we kind of been advising people stay away as much as possible. And but now, how do you do that? And,
Right. And when we're talking about post-election stress, this is not normal stress, because we know our body responds normally to stress whenever we are in some type of distressing situation or unpleasant situation. We always have some type of, anxiety, stress, toward that. But this is actually different.
Yep, it's
And
very different. Yes.
And did you know that this term was actually coined by Dr. Stephen Stosny?
Okay.
But way back, I believe he coined this term back in 2016.
I,
That's when the term
I
first.
did. I did not know that.
Yeah. So even though it's not a clinical diagnosis, it is something that people are experiencing nationwide, and even it's reaching globally too.
Yep, absolutely. The whole world seems like they have eyes on the United States, and it is simple because we do represent democracy, and many countries and people look up to us. And seems like this time around with the elections, we couldn't be more divided. We're looking at 50-50. That means either left or right, as good as flipping a coin. You're looking at, randomly speaking, every other person you and I see belongs either to one side or to the other. Now, that speaks to the bigger picture, Dr. T, because we're talking about COVID, how the way COVID is handled or will be handled. You're talking about fundamental worldviews. You're talking about abortion. You're talking about guns. You're talking healthcare. There's so many issues, and these two, the gentlemen running for office, the division couldn't be more clear, and people had a clear choice, so to speak. But then you have the fake news, if I can call it, through social media or other venues that people seem to be confused about a lot of things. So it's a lot of tension amongst people. You see some small pockets of ELB demonstrations and what have you. That
Just yesterday at TCF
that's
downtown
correct.
Detroit,
Detroit,
there were a group of individuals out there trying to get into
Yep.
Kobo,
Yep.
and they were irate, banging on the doors, trying to get in, and not realizing that when the ballots are being counted, only 134 people are selected
That's correct.
from both the Democratic
Yep.
and the Republican Party to do this count. So
That's correct.
everyone is represented equally
Correct.
when this
Correct.
process happens. So I don't know actually how many people are aware of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and you had to be pre-registered in order to attend. And once they had the number of people, obviously, then they stopped. And clearly, the people outside were not happy because they wanted to witness the vote count. But also, Dr. T, this is democracy at its best.
Yes.
Despite our differences,
Yes.
despite our emotions, despite our stressors, right? This is how democracy works. And there's this time we are again more divided than I think I've known in my years around. And this is it. And sure, I do believe it's working. It's working well. Again, despite if you're happy with the results or not, that's irrelevant to the democracy process itself.
Right, exactly. And I'm glad that we have this democracy process to where we can have our voices heard. So many people think that if they vote, their voice is not going to be heard, so they just don't vote. And when that happens, you really don't have too much of a say so when things go awry or they don't go as how you wish they would have.
I always told my children, if you don't vote, don't complain, right? So you have to wait another however many years, and then you vote, and then you complain all day long, so to speak. And sure enough, they voted, and this is the first time they both voted, 19 and 20-year-olds. So.
That is so wonderful. I had I've seen so many people posting on Facebook and other social media platforms of them taking their children out for the first time. They're 18 now, and they're going to vote for the first time.
There's an interesting trend with that, though, Dr. T. Actually, the young vote wasn't as much higher as it has been, say, 2016 and so forth. Sure, there was a small percentage higher, but you have growth in population, this and that you'd have to factor in. So actually, they're still disengaging. I don't think they trust the system. Also, I think the social media has taken over in so many ways that makes it difficult for them to focus on areas that they care. When, in truth, the future belongs to them. Right?
Absolutely. That's what all this is about now. We're voting now, not just for today, but for the future.
That's correct.
These policies that are being enacted now are going to affect future generations.
Yep.
Just like the Constitution when it was made. Yep. It's still affecting future generations.
Yep, and also I think we all need to be aware when we post information that we do a little research behind the scenes too.
No, not a little. Do a lot of research.
Vital. This stuff goes viral. You have other countries that possibly could be interfering with attention. They could.
That's a good point.
They could feed into people's stress, right? Because again, we read what we want to read, we hear what we want to hear, because it makes us feel more of, and it validates our feelings, right?
Right.
And it kind of feeds into our stress and anxiety, which can be dangerous because then we keep spreading it and we don't know if it's true or not. So doing some research before posting and spreading certain information, I think is very important. Now, that is a part of that free will. That is a part of our freedom. We're free to post, right? We're not in China. We're not in other countries. And I couldn't be more appreciative.
I don't know, because there's been a lot of people in Facebook jail, per se, because of what they've been posting, and that Facebook will literally take their site down for X amount of days, and they have no access to their Facebook account until Facebook deems that it's appropriate.
That's correct, which also we have legislature working on that, right? Because one of the questions that had come through Congress is who's making these decisions, what information good, when it's not. Dr. T, I see this as out of control, right? How is Facebook, one person or a dozen people who run the company, how do they determine what information? So that's one issue that I think has been raised and we're going to hear more of. The other part of it is, how do you sort the information that it has some basic relevance or validity, so to speak, on what it is, and versus you being interfered by other countries and foreign agents.
Right. And I think a lot of stress that people are feeling is because of social media platforms such as Facebook, because so many people can push their viewpoints on you and create conflict with people you don't even know.
Yep.
But you're having these constant debates back and forth, which is increasing your anxiety and stress.
Now, talking about 50-50, right? You have families who are divided, right? You have brothers, sisters, husband, wives, mother, daughters, and so forth. Now, listening to certain programs, people are really, really divided, and there seem to be this identity crisis because, again, it's not simply Democrat or Republican. It has to do with worldview and our
Right.
existential, at least perceptually so, right? When we talk about women's rights and the abortions and all those elements, people get pretty heated up because it directly impacts them.
Right. And to be perfectly honest, I don't want government making a decision about what I do about my body
That's
or
correct.
with my body.
That's
you
correct,
know,
right?
so
Right.
some things I don't even think should be part of legislation.
Well, correct. And then you have, just to use this example, you have those to the right that want to make that decision for a woman, yet they're advocate for smaller government, right? So it's an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense. And that's why people are turned off, especially young people. They look at this, they're very creative, and they really see the BS through it, right? They're like, okay, I'm just not going to be a part of that. And
Exactly.
they throw their hands up, which is very unfortunate because they need to intervene.
Exactly.
They can make decisions.
Exactly.
So had they voted in larger numbers, I think the decision by now would have been made one way or another, right? But they haven't. Very unfortunate. And I do think parents have a role here to help their children understand the importance of being involved, at least in voting, so to speak.
Right. Now, I was speaking to some people just in passing conversation, and I came across a young man who's like 27 years old. He has never, ever, ever voted. And I asked him, well, is there a reason that you don't participate in this process? And his response was, I just don't want to deal with the stress of it. I don't want to have to argue with my wife or go to the job and we're having these political conversations. When I go to work, I want to work. I don't want to be engaged in political rhetoric or jargon and have me thrown off all day.
That makes stress and anxiety worse because
Yes.
not only do you avoiding here, right? But you also feel like now you no longer have any control. You have no say in it. And just avoid stress and pressure, anxiety, arguments, and so forth may or may not be the best way to deal with it.
Right.
Now, I do suggest for many people at home who are on the opposite side, maybe it's time now to have a talk about politics, given that we have voted already and there is no minds to be changed in that way. And when things get heated up, let's just take time out, walk out, take a nice fresh walk with the weather being nice now. But it's just crazy that we're even having this conversation. Where we were many years ago and where we are now, and politics involved. So that just doesn't even sound right at a very intimate level in people's homes and lives and relationships and so forth. So now also let's keep in mind, Dr. T, we came into these elections with a lot of stress and anxiety due to pandemic, right?
Right.
That was a major issue. Now we were already on edge.
Yes.
You push people a little more, then you really have them on edge, right? And there's a bunch of these elements that all together make sometimes life hard to handle.
Yes.
And how we respond to that is different. Some people withdraw, some people go sleepless, and some people have anger. Some people
we're going to talk about we actually have some guests that will be
That's
joining
correct.
us today. We have
Jessica Ross, who's a psychotherapist from I believe she's in Macomb Township, her office.
okay.
And we also have Dr. Butler.
Yes, Dr. S. Kent Butler, who is actually the Chief of Diversity and Inclusion at the University of Central Florida. So I'm very happy to have him.
I'm excited to have him because, we're talking about inclusion here on a couple days after the elections, and still lots of tension and stress for people dealing with the post-election.
Exactly. And we have a couple of sponsors that we need to mention.
That's
so
correct.
We can keep
Let's pay
get
some
the bills.
Let's pay some bills. Yes. We are deeply thankful to Rick Ramirez, who's a real estate agent. He's a great guy. My family has done business with him in many occasions. and he is a wonderful salesperson. And also Omega Haagen Dog Deli, which is a deli in Ferndale on Hilton and 9 Mile. We thank both of these guys.
Okay. And you are tuned in to In Session on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. And we are your hosts, Dr. T and
Dr. Fishta. And by the way, for those who have any real estate needs and they need to get a hold of a good real estate agent, call Rick Ramirez at 248-789-5888.
yes, and our phone lines are currently open. So if you want to join the conversation, call us at 313-355-6018, and we would love to hear from you. Okay. So what we are going to be having a guest on. Let's see if she's available. But while we're waiting, we are talking about post-election stress. How many of you all are experiencing post-election stress? Give us a call, 313-355-6018. Our phone lines are open.
And also,
you were saying, Dr. Fishta?
yes, we have a call coming in, and let's talk with Jessica Ross.
Okay.
All right. Jessica.
Yes.
Dr. Fishta and Dr. T over here speaking with you, and of course our listeners are listening as well. How are you today?
I'm well. How are the both of you?
We are doing wonderful. Thank you for calling in and joining the conversation. Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so of course my name is Jessica Ross. I am the owner of JR Counseling in Sterling Heights. I am a counselor and a certified sex therapist, and so I work with people from teenage years through 80s and 90s. And it's been a lot of time doing work in just trauma, stress, anxiety, and life stressors.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Yep. Jessica, thank you so much for coming on with us, as we need people like you to expertise, and we're interested to start out by telling the topic today is post-election stress, and you are there working the front lines with people from a mental health point of view. You know, we want to hear your view on how people are being impacted by what is happening now.
Well, it's been quite heavy. Everybody experiences stress and anxiety at one time or another, but right now the reaction to election results, fear of what could happen as a result of the election is very high right now. I've experienced in the last, even today alone, panic attacks. People have expressed panic attacks to me, an inability to sleep, unable to turn the television off, worried, arming themselves. And so right now, with response to politically what's happening in the world, people are very afraid and nervous and stressed.
Yep.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I've been noticing a lot of people talking about having digestive issues and other problems such as headaches. What have you been hearing regarding post-election stress from maybe your clients or friends, family, and?
Well, a lot of it, as you mentioned, really has been digestive issues, running to the bathroom a lot, nausea. I've heard about rumination has been one that's come up a lot. Some people have even talked about crying spells, shortness of breath. Again, lack of being able to sleep or being woken up out of the sleep several times, just out of distress and worry. Those are chronic headaches, some back pain. Those are some of the higher symptoms that I'm hearing the most of.
So, Jessica, if I understand you right, that is basically the central nervous system being overly burdened, so to speak, and the fight or flight taking over, and clearly the digestive system and the whole GI system is very sensitive. So I assume this is a byproduct of an increase in anxiety overall, or stress and anxiety.
Well, absolutely. People are sitting in their sympathetic nervous systems right now. Our system can only take so much excitation before it starts to react poorly. And so we can only stay in anxiety for so long before depression naturally comes after that. And so people have been high stress for a couple of days now. So absolutely.
Yes, because when you were noting some of the symptoms that you are seeing, it was reminding me of symptoms of depression.
Yep. 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 Also, I can't help it but to ask you, Jessica. And you know, I know you. We've worked together, and you're a great colleague. And for the times we worked together many years, you also went to U of M, specialized in constant relationships and with focus, and being an expert in sexual. So. Are you hearing any of that? Could that be affected by this stress and anxiety, the quality of intimate relationships and so forth?
Well, absolutely. I have couples that are actually not getting along because someone wouldn't share their ballot or what they were voting for. So everything from the practicality of who a person might be voting for in a couple, to whether or not they are going to vote, to whether or not they're watching the election results, it's interrupting actual sex lives. It's interrupting the ability to be intimate and sit with each other. It's interrupting the ability to date and connect right now. And again, when we're experiencing anxiety and depression and low energy, we're also not wanting to go towards a partner, but especially if we don't feel supported or connected in the current political state of the world.
So, other words, if I translate it in basic, simple, common language, Jessica, you're telling me that the politics are getting into our bed?
Yeah. We are sleeping with politics rather than our partners.
Oh my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't have this. We cannot let our politics interfere with our interpersonal and romantic relationships. This is not good. It's not healthy.
Isn't that horrible? Also, Jessica, we were talking before you come on about, how people are really divided, and we have 50-50, and there is some fundamental differences here, again, with COVID, with abortion, guns, immigration, healthcare, the racial issues that we have been experiencing and so forth. There is so much at stake here because, apparently you have many people who believe one of these guys or the other is going to be the best and kind of fix some of these problems. Are you seeing this kind of division based on some of these areas?
Well, absolutely. It's a lot of division based on the facts of what are happening. I mean, people want their choices, and what we're seeing is that people are fighting over their choices. They're fighting in their families over their choices. Whole families are not talking because somebody believes in pro-choice and somebody believes pro-life, or somebody thinks some of the race crimes that have been happening are wrong and somebody doesn't. I've seen it in my own practice that it's impacted the way people even talk to me and how they are serviced. But quite frankly, it's a space, in my opinion, that it's just invasive. We started with this small seat, and it's now become overwhelming for people to think about all the issues on the table, and then to realize that the people you trusted or your family, they actually don't agree with you.
Well, and that's the thing. We have to realize that it is okay to disagree with someone, and we don't have to sever relationships just because we don't agree, especially on our politics. That's like the least thing that we should be arguing or ending friendships with. So I think it's really important, and I'm going to ask your opinion on this, Dr. Ross, that we should set boundaries when we're talking about our political views. What do you think?
Well, I do agree that we should set boundaries. I think that there has to be a limit to what you share and how you share. When you are voting on some of these issues, it's okay to advocate. It is okay to be persistent in your beliefs. But when you start trying to be harmful and destructive to other people's beliefs, it's not okay. And it doesn't matter to me what side you're on. We can all have a piece of this fight, and we can all advocate for what we believe in, but to do damage to somebody else because their choices are different, that part is not okay, and it's more harmful than anything.
Right.
So, and Jessica, obviously, stress and anxiety is often related to a perception of some kind of future outcome, so to speak. And again, given that we're talking elections, and given that we are voting for two people who are very different at many levels, we have half of the folks in this country who are going to lose, and half who is going to win, so to speak. Are there going to be winners and are there going to be losers? What is your view on this with respect to people's emotions, experiences, and really day-to-day emotional functioning?
Truth, because we have been so divided as a country so deeply in the last couple of months, I don't know that there are winners and losers here because we are so hurt and broken as a country. And so my opinion is that if we can't win for instance as a team as a whole, then no, because we are one country and we have to operate and live together. And if we can't do that cohesively, then I don't think anybody wins.
I definitely agree with that. Now, let me ask Dr. Ross, what suggestions do you have for people to cope with this election or post-election stress?
And also, in your answer, can you include the youth, either be the middle school, high school, teens, adolescents overall? See if you can include that in your response.
So number one is take care of yourself, and that's at any age, from womb to the grave. You need to take care of yourself. Don't get caught up in election hysteria. You still need to do your basics. Eat well. Get your exercise or movement throughout the day. Get enough sleep. Turn the television off. Still try and participate in a very normal routine. Binging the election news and waiting on a result, that is going to be more harmful to your state, and it's going to create anxiety. You also want to surround yourself with positivity. Put yourself in a place where you understand no matter what the outcome of the election, you know what you're going to do, and you know how you're going to move forward. Scale back and be simple. If it's too much for you, don't do it. Take deep breaths. Take your time. Make transitions with some mindfulness. Honestly, I've been telling a lot of my clients, again, to older, go off the grid. Get off Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, because every time you turn around, there's a pop-up ad. You can't go anywhere and not see something about the election. And if you do need to watch, limit 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And then go ahead and healthy distractions, taking mental vacations, staying away from overly opinionated people right now, no matter your age, is going to be the best. And telling people when too much, which kids have a harder time with this sometimes, not my small children, but saying to people, hey, that's enough. I can't talk about this anymore. I've reached my limit.
Okay. Well, Dr. Ross, I want to thank you for joining us. It has been a pleasure. And
also, can you, before you leave, how can people reach you?
Yep. So the website that I have is jessicaljross.com. That's jessicaljross.com. My phone number is 586-804-6209. And the email is office@jessicaljross.com. Any one of those ways, you'll get a hold of the office.
all right.
Jessica, thank you so much, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have you, and we hope to have you again on with us.
Yes, maybe
Absolutely. I appreciate it. You
We
have a good day.
perhaps you can come to the studio one of these days.
yes, we would love for
I'd
you.
love to be there.
Yes, and maybe next time when we do our next show, when we're talking about relationships and sex,
Yep.
that'll be a good episode for you to
Yep.
come and join us.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. I love to share my expertise.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jessica. You have a wonderful day.
You too. Good night.
All right.
Good
bye-bye.
night.
The stress has elevated to levels where people are now really feeling it, and also families divided.
Things that are going along with one another. And so that's kind of what themselves, but you can really tell just by the signage or not wear their face mask, on their face mask, kind of sets the tone to who's around you. And so you kind of not on guard, but there is tension at times when you're going to different places because you just don't know how you'll be received.
So basically, you know it, you feel it is there, which increases stress and anxiety for people. Again, coming up to these elections where we were already on edge with COVID and such. Dr. Butler, God bless your heart. Okay, you're the chief of inclusion in these divisive times. That at least in my time around some things in Florida. How do you deal with this in your day to day? How do you work with this concept of inclusion? Tell us anything you want about that.
So I think one of the things that you have to do is you have to be confident in yourself and your abilities and why you're here. I ask myself and I ask others, why are you here? You know, if you're coming to me and you're asking to do this work, you know, there's got to be a reason why you're here and what is it that you want to do. And so if you're coming because you want me to teach you, the lessons have been taught. I can't help you with that. But what I can do is have you work beside me and do the work that we necessarily need to be doing in order to change a community or change an environment. And my modus operandi is not to change any person. My modus operandi is to expose people to what is going on. And I've always done that in the times that I've been teaching and just when I work with clients or any of those things. It's like, I can only expose you. The exposure is hopefully for you to then take it and do some introspection, to do some reflecting. And then you, because of the information that you have, make the decisions that you need to make around those types of things that are happening before you. And the reason why is because so many people have learned lessons throughout life. And if we want to say that we are living in an environment that is, you know, that culturally there is a systemic system in place that does not provide equity for all individuals, right? And so I'm using those words on purpose because I need to temper how I speak because
I can tell, Dr. Butler,
you're passionate.
You are navigating well. Keep going.
The executive order that's out there is telling me that I can't talk about systemic racism, right? I can't tell someone how they are dealing with life because of stories that they've heard, narratives that they've heard that are untrue. And I have to be able to teach people about what history really shares about what has happened in these here United States when it comes to people not having equal access, right? And so I don't talk about equity the way that I talk about equality. Some people want to talk about equality, and I don't even think about that anymore. What I'm talking about is equity and access. We want
Exactly.
people to have access. And when people have the ability to get what they need, then they're not trying to take something from anyone else. They're trying to say, I have a right, and I need to be able to have my place at the table as well. And so that are the things, those are the things that I'm trying to do to help make a change. And so I stand strong in who I am and what I've learned over life. And I also understand from being a counselor, I can't change anyone. I can only try to expose them and help them see things differently. And then they take on the responsibility of either changing themselves or at least changing their views on how they see or how they react and treat other individuals.
You know, Dr. Butler, I can't help it but to ask you this question. I was looking at some polls coming in, and we know that the young folks are, even though there's been some
Supreme Court, right? And I don't know that everybody has that right or everybody who's able to be in that situation, but that's where I sit with that, right? And so this election wasn't about whether or not a Republican or a Democrat was in the House. It was about all the things that came with the person who's in the House right now has put down on me, especially as a Black person, and how I see and able to navigate my life, right? So, like I was saying with you, the executive order changes how I have to
Now let me ask, how has the or if at all, because we're talking politics, post-election stress, but I want to know, there was an order put in place to where students who lived overseas could not come back to the United States to attend class.
That was lifted.
That was lifted?
Was quickly lifted. Correct.
Okay,
Am I
great.
correct, Dr. Butler? That was
It
lifted.
was lifted.
Yep.
Okay, so what's the response on campus and the climate with the students after this election? So we voted on Tuesday. Here it is Thursday. What's going on campus?
Well, I think, we're kind of virtual and not virtual. So I think just what's going on in terms of stress, people are feeling the doom of being in the moment, right? They're like, we don't know. And so they're sitting on pins and needles, right? Whether you are Republican or Democrat in your views or whatever you are in terms of your political views, you're sitting, laying in wait to see what are going to be the results of this election. And so depending on what side of you are on, you don't know. And so on one side you want your candidate to win, but on the other side also, for some people, I think from the Democratic side of it is, well, will there be some kind of racial holy war that comes up if the other person doesn't win, right? And so when you see people out there with guns and chanting and doing other things along those lines, not only are you fearful that your person may not win, but if your person does win, what will be the aftermath?
Well, sometimes,
And so I
Dr.
think that's
Butler,
what's happening.
here in Michigan, and I'm sure you're aware, we worried about people being kidnapped.
Right.
And I know the dynamics in Florida as well that you pointed out earlier, that the division is very deep, and it's also visual on your streets as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me really quick. You are tuned in to In Session on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. And I am your host, Dr. T. And we also have a host, Dr.
Fishta.
And on the line, we have with us Dr. S. Kent Butler, who is the Equity and Diversity Chief Officer at the University of Central Florida. So all the way from Florida, we have we are sharing information about post-election stress and how it's impacting us. So Dr. Butler, we were on the phone earlier with Dr. Ross, and she was telling us some of the physical symptoms that people are experiencing. She talked about digestive issues and
Sleep problems with sleep, and physiological factors that are a byproduct of stress and anxiety.
Can you add to that?
So, so there's a lot of things that people are experiencing in terms of happening, right? So, there's a lot of unpleasant emotions, right? People are uneasy. There's confusion. There's irritability. People are sad. People are angry. People are having unhealth. They need to still be living. They're thinking about whether or not they want to. There are other people saying things along those lines. It affects how we do our work, right? You're sitting there, you're daydreaming about what's going on, and you can't stay concentrated on the work that you do. There are interpersonal problems. You might withdraw from relationships. You might go into isolation. You may be very. A lot of times we don't communicate well as it is. Can you imagine trying to communicate under stress? So
Right.
those types of things are happening.
Right. And even trying
people's
to
body-
communicate with someone who may have a different political view than your own. I noticed that people are kind of shying away and even losing friendships over this election.
Yes.
Now, also,
Sure, and I think that, I think they lose those relationships because, again, they're not having the conversations that are necessary to kind of cultivate the relationship, right? So many people the views for why they are voting are not expressed in a way that people can understand it. So you a lot of times when somebody says something, you go to the worst case scenario of why they would be able to support something or someone. And so unless they can sit down and really have an meaningful conversation around what this is, um, they talk at each other, and that's how friendships get lost.
You know, Dr. Butler, Dr. T and I were really interested in this topic. And you know, we're looking at today, right? Last 24 hours, we've had over 100,000 cases, new cases of COVID-19. Yet,
Right.
we're talking about post-election.
Right.
It seems like it's so unfortunate, right? On the other side, it seems like we got a break from this COVID for 2 days now, which is literally grinding at people all over this country and the world. And you know, Dr. Butler, the world is looking at us. They forgot for a moment about COVID, because I do watch other news from different countries. Tell me this also, Dr. Butler. You know, you're an educator. Parents are worried about their children in college. They send them away to Central Florida University and other places. Now, we are educators ourselves, Dr. T and I. And in my classroom, you know, in all honesty, I stay away from politics, right? Even though I do give them a chance to talk about racial factors and thoughts and so forth. I consciously stay away from politics. How are things in that area for you and your colleagues and students at University of Central Florida?
So we've been told for so long that that there are taboo subjects that we can't address or we can't touch. And so I hear you when you say that you don't talk about politics. But what I personally would encourage people to do is to talk about politics, is to talk about religion and spirituality, to talk about those things that we've been told were taboo. And the reason why is because where we go, it's involved in our decision making. It's involved with so many different things. And if we can't have work and you're governed by your beliefs and your morals and everything else, but yet you're not supposed to talk about it.
Right. And you know, I'm a little
you
bit
know,
different, Dr. Butler and Dr. Fishta. I don't necessarily talk politics in the classroom, but I do talk about the importance of social justice, legislative advocacy within the counseling field, and how our lawmakers and decision makers impact our clients
Exactly.
as well.
Right.
So when we're looking at these candidates and presidents and senators, congresspeople, all these people make laws and determine what happens to your mental health.
Yes, definitely. I do
Right.
as well in that way. And
And if you right,
yep.
and if you can't talk about those things, and you can't have that be a part of who you are as a human being, you're supposed to leave that at the door. That is the part that leads to the depression and the other things that are happening because we're not able to be our full selves. We have to put these masks on. You know, talk about COVID. We put these masks on every day so that we can survive in a work environment or a school environment. That if we had just opened the door and let the elephant go, where each other is coming from, as opposed to being at each other's throats because where we come from.
Correct. Now, that's also involved with community and other relations, given that you are the president-elect. What are you seeing division in students themselves and where they're affected in their